Thank you very much. Please silence phones, pagers, and such. Item 1, citizen concerns. Is there anything on the citizen would like to discuss that is not already on the agenda? Item 2, approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 3 through 8 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. 3 is approval of the minutes of the December 14 meeting. 4, approval of claims. 5, juvenile detention, received juvenile detention's November population report. 6, county treasurer, approval of lifting tax suspension for initials TH. 7 is human resources. A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. B, presentation of award certificate to Cynthia Weemold. C, approve the Woodbury County travel and expense policy addendum. Item 8, community and economic development. Approve the appointment of Tom Thiessen to the Board of Adjustment for a new 5-year term. And B, approve the appointment of Corey Meister to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a new 5-year term. Are there any additions, corrections to the consent agenda?
I'll move the approval.
I'll second for discussion.
Motion by Radig, second by Taylor to approve consent agenda.
Just wonder, Mr. Chair, on the juvenile detention, maybe this is something that Dennis can work with Ryan Weber on. We have the numbers as far as the juvenile holds, adult court, Macy Omaha Nation holds. Can we get a projection of revenue as far as where we're at right now in terms of what we were projected to be at? I think that's something that, these are good numbers, but that's also important to kind of know. So if,
the numbers you'll get will be down for this current year because you've already reduced next year's over the current year by 120,000.
okay,
So when I get the current year, where we're at projection-wise, that's going to be a lot lower.
okay,
Projection, which means for this year, we got to eat some reserves to cover expenses. Next year, that'll be made up through taxes.
good. Thank you, that's it.
Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 9, community and economic development. Approve and authorize the chairman to sign the release of mortgage made to said corp incorporated.
Good evening, David Gleiser, Director of Community Economic Development. This is a little bit of a housekeeping item. Mr. Countryman has fulfilled his obligation to the county and has paid his loan off. Recently, the United Escrow in their abstracting found one mortgage that we did not release. So it's been paid. We should release it.
I will move that.
Motion by Radig, second by Taylor. Further questions?
I'm sorry I said Countryman, but this was for the MacDon Enterprises. Another one of our borrowers from the loan program paid off their loan, same time frame, so I got those mixed up. This is for said Corp's loan that we made for the grocery store in Correctionville.
Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Next one's a public hearing. You're not quite there yet. I suggest that you ask Susan Stewart to come up and give you the report.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Supervisors, my name is Susan Stewart. I live at 29 West 45th Street in Sioux City, Iowa. I was appointed by you guys as a member of the Woodbury County Temporary County Redistricting Commission for the purpose of drawing the boundary lines for the supervisor districts pursuant to Iowa Code 331.210A. The other members you appointed are Auditor Gill and Tom Kleen. We have had a series of meetings. They were well attended by members of the media and not too many other people. Yesterday, we held the public hearing of the temporary commission, and those boundary lines were approved at the public hearing. There was no one in attendance at the public hearing other than members of the media. These lines were drawn primarily by Auditor Gill, but I think we all reviewed these, and they are consistent with the standards of Iowa Code 42.4, which they're required to be, which include compactness and contiguousness and no consideration of things like the political affiliations of the members of the boards of supervisors or their locations. And if you do approve them tonight, they will become effective January 15th. Pat, did I miss anything?
No, as long as they understand the standards that we adhered to, and I think.
And yeah, it was a very smooth process, and I appreciate what Auditor Gill did. I also appreciate the really cool software, the Esri software that the Secretary of State made available to all of us, so we could become dangerous by trying to figure out how to draw boundary lines. But I appreciate the opportunity to be on the commission, and I would urge you to approve the report of the commission you have before you and approve these boundary lines. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions.
Was that item 10, Pat?
Yes, but that portion wasn't on there. That's strictly ministerial. What you need to do is, if you don't have any questions, is that entertain a motion to receive the report.
I'll move to receive the report.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt to receive the report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
I got 4:38 on Verizon time, Mr. Gill. Is that close enough for the 4:40 set time for?
I think it's close enough.
Thank you. We are at a set time to conduct a public hearing on an ordinance relating to the assessment of wind energy conversion property as authorized by Iowa Code Chapter 427B.26.
Thank you, David Gleiser, again, Community Economic Development Director. And just to pick up where we left off from last week's public hearing and our discussion about the proposed ordinance, again, this is really a conversation that we're having in regards to if Woodbury County ever has a commercial wind turbine development, how would Woodbury County like to classify the taxes for that structure, and how will that revenue come into the county, in what form, and what will that look like? To help start this conversation, I think it might be helpful if you have a little bit of background on the utility tax replacement. Because we've all been kind of scratching our heads and sort of trying to figure out, if you were a developer, what's the advantage for you one way or the other? And I think that is a factor maybe that's affecting our decision-making process at this moment. My understanding of utility tax replacement, and this page came straight from the Iowa Department of Management, explains why utilities are assessed in the way that they are today. I provided last week an excerpt from the Iowa Department of Revenue on utility tax replacement, and what I'd like to do also is provide the code section for taxes on electricity and natural gas providers, because the formula in which utilities are expected to pay taxes is codified in that language, and it's demonstrated here in this chart. I was asked last week to come up with an example or a comparison of what revenues might look like in a certain situation under an ordinance or not. I was asked to verify that math with an entity not as a local utility. I did reach out to the Iowa Department of Revenue to see if they would confirm the figures and that I've got in front of you. Basically, they will not do that. And so what they've said is that the language is in the code, the formula is there, the utilities in Iowa know what they are expected to pay. The formula has variables, and each project, each company could have a different set of variables for specific factors that would be in that math. The best that I can do to demonstrate what the revenue would look like under these different scenarios is on this piece of paper right here. Julie Royson, the administrator that oversees the replacement tax at the Iowa Department of Revenue, stated that utilities benefit from local governments that have stable funding. Property taxes provide stability. These are her comments. We should trust these numbers because these are the numbers that they would provide them. I have no other explanation or nothing else to offer you folks other than this is the formula. These are the estimates that this company has given me as far as what they would pay. And again, this is a hypothetical 100 megawatt project. So if we follow the replacement tax formula, it's going to produce a number that will provide charge 0.006 of a cent per kilowatt hour. Their estimates for their particular system in this particular project is $210,240. Under the 427B.26 ordinance, it is actually assessed not on production, but on cost. So the value of the structure. Even when we impose the exemption schedule that's allowed, you can see the breakdown in the revenue side by side. I chose to extend it from year 1 to year 40 because 40 years is the useful life of an average commercial wind turbine. Over the life of this hypothetical project, Woodbury County would receive $29 million more in revenue under the 427B ordinance. And again, I'm not trying to unravel which is better or decide which is better for any utility company because each utility company has a different set of factors and costs that they're dealing with. Whether we're dealing with Mid-American Energy, who's established and has a presence here in our state and our community already, or it be a renewables company from Spain that happens to talk somebody into providing land to put one of these up. Their factors for cost, their net acquisition costs, they're all different. And so it's really hard for me as a layperson to put numbers into these factor boxes when I don't know the variables. I hope that's easy to understand, but this is the best example that I can provide to help you make a comparison of the two. I would also emphasize that this document here states that originally the landscape in Iowa, utilities were assessed on cost. So the state changed that. And then what they did is they allowed by special ordinance an exception to that. And again, my assumption is that they did that so local governments have the ability to use tax increment financing, which is a, financing mechanism for local governments to either provide support directly to the project or to help effectuate other economic development goals that they have. And I would also emphasize that if you look on page 19 in Woodbury County's General Development Plan, under our Economic Development Goal 2.5, this aligns with our comprehensive plan. and that we are fully exploring alternative renewable energy sources, particularly wind generation facilities, both as a contribution to the total energy needs of the country and as a new source of income for property owners. So and with that, I will close my remarks and answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
David, we had asked last week if he'd verify that Mid-American wants this. Is that the case, or when you inquired as to?
Yes, and like I've said, I believe I've said it last week, they have not indicated whether or not they prefer a situation under 427B or replacement tax. It was my initial assumption when I first looked at the exemption schedule and I see 70% exempt. I view that initially as an economic development incentive. And so with that, I wrote a memo to the board in which my assumption at that point was this is really going to be needed if you want to get one of these deals.
Have they been asked since then?
I've learned a lot since then, and I guess my assumption now is that it depends with each particular developer and whatever variables that they have for cost and what other factors that they use in their decision-making process. And that can be quite different when talking one company versus another.
I guess my question still is, we don't know whether Mid-American wants this or not? Kind of a yes or no?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Okay. Who have you been working with that we could ask?
I've been working with Matt Ott at
Okay.
Mid-American Energy and Sam Wagner, who is their business development manager.
Maybe Susan has some past history she could.
My
Mr.
assumption.
Wagner's exact comments were that they remain completely agnostic.
So I did speak with Julie Royson for nearly an hour on this, and I asked her why would a utility push, which I think was our original assumption, that if you're going to have this ordinance, you need to adopt this ordinance so that they do want to come in, rather than pay $210,000 a year. Why would they want to pay $1 million? And she said something very interesting. She said, there's a gray area in statute. It's not clear that they have to go to utility replacement tax. They could be locally assessed, in which you would stand to gain as a county much more than the $1 million at the 30% net acquisition cost. And so I think that that's kind of, right now we're under this either or fallacy. Either we adopt this, in which we would stand to gain $1 million, or we don't, in which we'd only gain $210,000. But she said the statute isn't clear.
Correct.
And so because of that, you could push to have this locally assessed. Now, Mid-American could legally challenge that you are doing that, and we could end up in some sort of legal challenge. But I think that that's...
Could you repeat that? I don't understand that.
Yeah. So what she's saying is the statute is not clear as to how wind is assessed currently. That's why they have this task force that's being developed to make a recommendation to the legislature. So right now, it's almost as if there's only two paths. Either we adopt this ordinance, and after year 6 and 7 into perpetuity, they're assessed at 30% net acquisition cost, or it's the utility replacement tax,
Correct.
$210,000.
Correct.
What she's saying is the statute is not clear as to how they're to be assessed. So a county could, Woodbury County could say, we're going to have this locally assessed. Mid-American would most likely legally challenge that, in which case we would stand to gain a lot more than the $1 million every year. Because I was asking her point blank, why would Mid-American want such an ordinance, which I think was our whole assumption all the way along.
Yeah.
If you don't do this, then they won't come.
Yeah.
And according to her, it's because it could be assessed locally, in which you'd stand to gain a whole lot more than the $1 million.
I don't quite follow that, because basically what she said to Julie Connolly and I And I mentioned the task force at last week's public hearing was meeting on December 15th. Ms. Royson told me that she believed the task force's recommendation on this gray area would be replacement tax. So if I had a guess or bet, that would be my bet today. If that were not the case, and it were locally assessed, it would be locally assessed under the framework that's in the code. So it'd be under the framework in which we're operating with today, based off of net acquisition.
According to Julie Royson, you would stand to have a lot more revenue as a county if it was locally assessed, much more than the 30% net acquisition cost, in which case they probably would not do the project, according to her, because the county would stand to gain that much more revenue. And they would probably legally challenge us from being able to do so, because they wouldn't want to pay that. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a business decision, right? So I think that's, right now, we're sort of stuck in this either-or fallacy, wondering why would Mid-American want to have this 30% net acquisition cost when it's nearly 5 times as much that they'd be paying? And I think that's part of the answer.
I think that,
Mr. Chairperson, you're discussing the ordinance now, you should close the public hearing. And then the next one is the reading of the ordinance.
Should we allow for time if there are members of the public that want to?
Yes.
Do that now or close the public?
Now you're asking for comments from the public on this, and
Okay.
then you go to the ordinance.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this or against?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Mr. Taylor?
So, and just to close out my thoughts there, I agree that that's most likely what that task force will recommend to the legislature, who may or may not adopt it. But right now, according to Julie Royson, there's gray area in the statute as to how this can be assessed. And so it's not just, well, it's 210,000 or it's $1 million. It could be a whole lot more than that if we challenge to have it locally assessed. I just want to make her point clear so that we're not operating out of these are the only 2 options and look at how much more you all could gain.
she did not explain that.
Gleiser.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess that's news to me because when we had our conference call with our county assessor, that's not how Ms. Royson explained it to me.
I think maybe it's because the question wasn't asked, why would a utility want to pay?
I asked that very pointed question.
Okay, well, I'm telling you her answer to me. So,
Which we have no control over how she answers it to you
Right,
either
right.
individually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not,
And I guess the point being is that they're not really very helpful in telling us which option is going to be better for you. Here, they said, here's the code, companies know what they would have to pay, this is the scenario under the ordinance.
in other words, they don't want to get into the advice on whether or not you want to pass an ordinance.
Well, because they don't know.
And that's not
Yeah,
condescending or derogatory towards you.
I'm not taking it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, I completely understand how they don't want to
Yeah,
kind of guide us through this.
they're not going to pick one or the other, say do this or do that. It's, this is the code, these are the rules, there is a gray area, but I'm pretty confident, or I believe that if there were a challenge, if someone repealed it, or say we do not adopt one and a wind turbine is born in Woodbury County, I would believe that it would be under the replacement tax formula in which utilities companies in Iowa have been paying for a very long time. That would be my assumption.
And boiling it down
And
further, it would be a business decision then.
best
on-
recommendation as a paid staff person to the County Board of Supervisors is just that. It's the best I can recommend, it's the best I know.
Do you have any idea when the legislature would be looking at making their clarifications or? Okay.
Next year or sometime thereafter.
So it's it's a question in my mind. Pass this now and make it like a carrot. If they're gonna make their move, they make it now, or?
I think it's hard to do when we can't even have the simple question, do they want this or not?
Sure.
I mean,
Well, they're never gonna answer that.
Why would you,
They won't answer that, Mr. Taylor.
Mid-American will not answer
I
whether or
believe
not
you-
they want Woodbury County to pass
No,
this
sir, I
ordinance?
believe you will not get that, I get it.
Then I don't see any, what's the impetus to pass it?
I would recommend that
Why-
we do, because we could convert it to property tax, use it for tax increment financing, and
Because it just gives clarification basically to the code. That's the reason.
because as a utility, we're not able to TIF it. I mean, and I think
Yeah,
that's pretty much my assumption of why all of the counties in Iowa who have commercial wind turbines have done this. And my assumption also being because most of these are rural counties, so they traditionally may not see a lot of large-scale economic development with numbers such as this. This is these are probably unprecedented economic development projects for these rural counties. How else are they going to capture any increment in those counties? They couldn't if they left it as a replacement, but they could if they convert it to property tax. And that's why I believe,
I'm less concerned. I don't see TIF as something that we need to do. I don't see the projects lined up out there for it. I mean, we mentioned a school or a jail or public buildings. I'm less concerned on the TIF aspect of it than I am just from the basic fairness side of it. As I mentioned originally, we don't do a 70% into perpetuity abatement for any
I understand that.
private. So those are my, and I think maybe some of those counties were told, you either adopt this ordinance or you're just going to have 210,000. Those are the only two choices, and said, well, here's 5 times as much without the information. Well, you could insist as a county that you locally assess it, in which you'd stand to gain a whole lot more than that.
I understand.
So it's just, and I may just be 1 out of 5, but
Anywhere else, has that been contested? Is the task force being formed because of that concern?
There is one county that has put a moratorium and has talked about repealing their ordinance.
yeah, she said Marion County is in a legal battle with Mid-American in a lawsuit.
And based on what I understand of the situation, the complaints from the property owners in that county were related to noise. I am not sure what their setback distances are. I'm not sure if they allow exceptions for setbacks. And so, I guess, I don't know. I know that the distances that we have in our ordinance for siting and decommissioning them are far enough where audible noise should not be an issue. And, but it's basically, it's been a noise issue in that county, and not knowing the ins and out of it, they put a moratorium on to prevent more from coming in. And then some guy named David Gleiser started calling the state, calling every office in the state, asking these questions. And I think it was great timing as far as that task force meeting. I asked to be on the task force. I said, if you would like a citizen representative or someone, I feel like I spent a lot of time studying this stuff. And if you're looking for additional input or membership, I'd be willing to sit on that. I did not get invited to sit on that, but I understand all of your comments, so.
Dennis?
Just a quick calculation here. If Jeremy is right and understands it enough that you could not pass this ordinance, you already got a set value of 150 million they presented to him if they get the tax exemption. So if the local assessor assesses it, she's already got a number to work with. You roll that back by 90%, then you tax the whole value without any exemptions, you come up for 4 years with 136 million. That's a huge difference.
After how many years? 40?
40 years. Yeah, I'm using what Dave's got, 40. 40 years. These are all based on 40 years Dave did here. But just if the third option is a viable way to go.
Well, then that turns it into a business decision on their
it'll
part.
literally probably kill the project. And not getting an exemption may kill it too, who knows?
Well, that said, I haven't,
understand why they'd want to pay 4 to 5 times more. I don't understand that.
I think the point is that they don't want to pay 4 or 5 times more, but they also know that there's another third option that a county could adopt or could challenge or
They didn't
try to
make us
push.
aware of that one.
Well, it doesn't make sense otherwise, I don't think.
Yeah, because 136 million is a lot different than 5 or 37. That's when they'll probably appeal it, or not even come.
So it looks to me, when I read this, though, from Iowa Department of Management, it looks like a utility has the right to seek not to be taxed on their property as a competitive deal, and then seek out the utility tax replacement. Is
Yeah,
that-
the landscape in Iowa used to be that they were assessed on the value. And then they changed that to make it more competitive. And then they allowed, by the special ordinance, the ability for communities to convert it back so that way we could, convert it to property tax and use TIF.
I would just say, and quote, Julie Royson says the statute is gray and it is not clear. Otherwise, she has no dog in the fight, right, to make up that statement. And so I know what that cover sheet and
Sure, but like,
summarize
this
it.
is from the Iowa Department of Management. They're not going to put something on the website if they don't believe it's true.
And the task force was enacted back when the law was first passed, I think in the 70s. So the task force was not commissioned or put together just to look at this specific issue today. It's a body. Its purpose is to continually review and assess and make recommendations when needed. But as of late, the issues that are coming forward, or the questions at the community level that are arising up into the state are, some of these turbines are like 20 years old now, and some of them are getting refitted with new equipment. So how do we assess that? Do we assess it back at 0 through 5, 10, 2015? So the task force is looking at that issue. They're looking at, what if someone repeals it? And then, so yeah, I guess that's the state of affairs as it is today.
Well, I think the issue that Jeremy raises is to some extent a legal question. It's not something that our office has been asked to look at. We can do that to the extent that, it can look at the statute and is there a gray area? Is there an argument that it could be taxed basically in this third way that Jeremy's talking about? So if you want us to look at that, we can do that. I think just it makes sense to me that if there's a risk that the assessor could assess it normally and not under the utility tax framework, passing the statute, basically creates certainty for a project that's coming in. So I can see why that may be beneficial to that. But what you're saying completely makes sense to me from a legal standpoint. I think that in large degree it would be up to the assessor if it is a possibility. The assessor has a certain amount of discretion of how they operate and then ultimately answer to the conference board rather than the Board of Supervisors. So that's really how it's assessed is a little bit beyond the control of, of this board, but maybe a question for the assessor as well, as far as if they're open to viewing it that way or see that ambiguity or that grayness there.
So where are we?
I think without any other discussion or questions, we're probably to the reading.
Okay, that's where I would. And Mr. Young, you have anything?
Do we know what the county assessor's position might be?
In terms of if she were to assess it? Last week, I provided in your materials 2 code sections. I forget what they are, 441.72, and there was another one. One is basically replacement tax, one is under the assessor. Again, when county assessor and I spoke with Ms. Royson, we were under the assumption or the belief that if there were to be a recommendation, it would be under this replacement tax formula. She did not describe the possibility of a third new way. So that's news to me, I guess. That's all that, in the code, there's basically two ways. And there's a belief that there's some interpretation uncertainty, or it's not really clear, I guess they say. I don't know. When I read the code, I think it says that it should be under the replacement tax. But I'm not a lawyer.
Saying 437A, the replacement tax. And we're looking to go under 427B to get it as property tax. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, I read
Yes.
427B before, and now I got 437A in front of me.
I mean, I guess that's, I mean, I'm a little thrown off because the third option is news to me, and so if that were told to me, then I'd probably change my presentation a little bit.
You agree it's wise to explore that?
Well, we should.
I guess it's probably wise to explore and see, well, what is the possibility of a third option then? Yeah, I would say yes.
Mr. Widman, on the agenda, this is just the third reading. Does that constitute adopting the ordinance, or?
No, and we specifically, that's not on the agenda tonight because of the requirement of the 30-day waiting period from the first public hearing. So the earliest the board could adopt the ordinance, if it desires, is sometime in January.
January, I think it was January 5th is the actual day, but we scheduled a regular agenda item for January 11th for the board to approval or not.
So, yeah, approval of the reading would just be, it moves forward, but the actual
Right.
vote on the adoption will not be till January.
Right. So that's what's before you now, is whether you're going to approve the third reading.
In the approved,
I move to postpone third reading pending further investigation of option C.
My recommendation on that, I think we can do the work in the background, but if you approve the third reading, then that'll set it up for a vote in January that would either be adopting the ordinance or not adopting the ordinance. I think that's where you want to be.
We'd have all the readings done, and then we can vote up or down on
Correct.
adoption.
and we don't need to vote up or down. It doesn't need to come back at all unless somebody affirmatively chooses to place it on the agenda. Is that correct?
I withdraw my motion.
I will move to conduct the third reading.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor to conduct the third reading of the ordinance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Good discussion.
You didn't read it, though, Mr. Chair.
It's true.
Please don't make me read it. He did that before once.
Would you like to read it? Can we move on, Mr. Gill?
You can.
Item 10, County Auditor, approve the first reading of the ordinance for the public,
It's a public hearing first.
oh, I'm sorry. Public hearing for the consideration of an ordinance fixing the boundaries of the Woodbury County voting precincts and the Supervisors districts of Woodbury County. Is there anybody that would like to speak for or against this consideration? Hearing none, I will move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. 10,
I'll move to approve the first reading.
motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt to approve the first reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. B, waive the second and third readings.
I will move that.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt to move, to waive the second and third readings. Comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item C, adopt the ordinance.
I will move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor to adopt the ordinance fixing the boundaries of Woodbury County voting precincts. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Item D, authorize the chairman to sign the county re-precincting certification.
I will move that.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt, to authorize the chairman to sign the county re-precincting certification. Further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 10E, authorize the chairman to sign the county redistricting certification.
Move that.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. Further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Looks like everybody on the commission left. Item 11, Siouxland Regional Transit System. Mr. Cole.
Good evening, and thank you for the time. I'm here today, my name is Bill Cole, 4838 Meadowlark Lane. I'm representing the CERTS, Siouxland Regional Transit. I'm the finance director for CERTS and Simcoe. What we're here to ask for today is for the county to authorize us to begin to work with county staff and put together a bond issue, which would probably take place in the next 2 or 3 months. We are building a new building. We received a $7 million, 100% funded rural build grant 2 years ago. We were the only rural transit in the United States to receive that grant, 100% funding. Since that time, we have negotiated all the contracts with the FTA. We have done the plans and specs, and it has gone out for bids. As you might expect, since 2018, when we put in the request till today, prices have gone up considerably. It's now going to cost $10.2 million to build that building. We still have the $7 million federal funds, the 100% grant. CERTS is in a position to use about $1.2 million worth of reserves, which leaves us about $2 million short. Now, CERTS is a nonprofit, and we understand that the county has the ability to bonding to help nonprofits. So we are requesting $2 million revenue bonds. So it wouldn't affect your debt limit because they're not GO bonds, they're revenue bonds. We would like to work with staff and either the Aller firm or the Dorsey Whitney firm, and then D.A. Davis for the bonding. I think the county has used all of those entities. So I guess we're just asking tonight for the motion to start that process and know that the county is supporting it so that we can proceed and start groundbreaking probably in March or April. I'll be glad to try and answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cole?
Thank you all for what you do. My dad drives for CERTS, and you all do a wonderful
Okay,
service.
you bet.
Yeah, thank you.
Any comments from Mr. Butler?
We get $10 million per calendar year that we can do as bank qualified, tax exempt. All you people do is act as a conduit, so they get the tax exempt and a lower interest rate. There is no expense to the county whatsoever. They assume all the cost. We have done this in the past, and right now there's nobody requested funds for that $10 million for next calendar year, 22. We will probably be using about $2 to $3 million of that $10 million for our CIP project that we're going to borrow for in May. So there's plenty of latitude here, even for them to come forward or other nonprofits too.
I'd move it.
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Any further questions?
And Bill, I've kept them pretty apprised of all the situation going on in this as we've moved forward. And I also want to clarify that CERTS and Simcoe are not the same organization. So there's some saying, well, Simcoe's not allowed to go into debt. Well, CERTS is not Simcoe. So.
Right, CERTS is a nonprofit. Simcoe was formed with the 2080, two entirely separate entities.
Any other? Thank you for that. That clarifies for some. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Item 12, Siouxland District Health, approve and allow the agreement to be signed with HCI Construction for window replacement in the amount of $75,150.
Good afternoon, WoodburyCounty County Board of Supervisors. Kevin Green, Director here at Siouxland District Health Department. This was a CIP project that we had put on the list in Kenny's process. However, this year when we went to go ahead and do it, as like everything, the cost estimates came in over what we had originally anticipated. I will admit that I think our original cost estimate came in 2 years ago. We should have refreshed that. But however, when it did come in, this is a project we were interested in getting moving forward. And because of the cost overrun type thing, Dennis and Kenny had asked me to come to the board to request permission to spend above the $40,000. One of the things I also went through is reviewed. We do have some things that what we have received from some of the pandemic funding that has come through that has initiated some cost savings within the organization. And our health fund balance is something we'll be discussing during the budgeting process. But as Tyler and I sat down and took a look at it, we determined that we could probably come up with about $20,000 that we would pay out of our funds in a partnership with the board and the county buildings department to be able to complete this project. And so what we're hoping to gain by this is, as somewhat stated, is the front windows in the building were put in the 70s. What this project does is it reduces the space of the glass or size of the glass in the front. We're going to build a header that comes down and comes up, reduce that glass space, and what are anticipated, we're looking at revenue or expense reductions as far as with Mid-American. Our front area of the building is difficult. To be honest with you, on sunny winter days, it's difficult to keep it cool because of the reflective and the solar that comes in, and in the summer it's even worse. And so we're also looking at that air handling unit up front there too. We know that'll need replacement probably in the next few years, but this was one of the things we wanted to do to reduce the load on that unit. And that's why it was suggested, and I also had them come forward with one of the gentlemen that just sort of an assessment, and like he said, to get an actual cost savings, we would have gone through with the HVAC contractor to do a full sort of cost return on investment type thing. So I was just coming to the board as far as requesting for moving forward, actually looking at $55,000 from the Board of Supervisors, and then the other $20,140 would come from Siouxland District Health Department.
So where does the $55,000 that comes from CIP there, right, Dennis?
Yes, that's the amounts, we'll figure out what we need to borrow in May with all of our different projects. But when we do our CIPs, like Kevin said, you receive them all, you do not approve them. We're making them come back on each project, because each project's probably gonna be a lot more than what they estimated there at that point in time. The key is, we need to know the final number probably by the middle of April, so we can go out and start borrowing the money to pay for our CIP, which will be levied the following year, next fiscal year. So he's following protocol, everything he's come back to the board asking for. Everybody we just had one individual from CERTS come forward, look what their cost did. This is happening with every construction project that was budgeted a year ago. Is this when they present their CIP? It's February of 2020. A lot of changes have happened until 21.
Kevin, have you worked with Mid-American on rebates?
No, I have not. I guess, do I do that, or does that come through the building services?
Either one.
Okay.
Or do you know if Kenny has, or?
I can ask Kenny, I don't know. I know we've been submitted basically all of our records and what we pay and everything else is in that system. But no, I haven't specifically talked to Mid-American about that.
So one of the things I'd ask if we can have him submit the drawings along with any energy bills. I think it's millage at Nexent, and then they can come up with a custom rebate application. But for us, if we authorize up to that much, and then they say give you $5,000 or $10,000 off, we don't actually expend it until we borrow, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Well,
if you,
no, they can go ahead and do the project, because we do other projects
But-
at a time, then we borrow the money in May.
but the thing is, once you start a project, you become ineligible for the rebate. So I just ask if we get pre-approval for it, even if it delays the project a little bit. Once you start it, they already, in their minds, are like, well, you're gonna do it anyway. And
Okay.
So if we could do that, that'd be,
All right.
And we could get a credit back like we did with the LED lights. We got hundreds of thousands of dollar
Right,
rebates.
right.
And then it goes back to where the fund paid for, which would be our CIP.
thank you.
So where does that leave us with the current agreement? Do we want to
Well, I was ready to shoot it down, and then now you throw a carrot out there, 20-some thousand, I don't know.
So is it a 20-55 split? Is that what we're?
Yes.
Right.
Yep. And then if there's rebates, it'd come back to the county CIP. Say they get 10,000 rebates, if they know ahead of time, they could reduce the cost. Otherwise, we just put it back in the CIP fund. We did that with LED lighting.
Yeah, you probably have to expend it first and get it back later, rather than reduce the cost.
Yep.
Personally, I don't think the windows are in that bad a shape as far as a priority goes. So that's why, in general, I was ready to just say no.
Okay.
You know, I do see where, yeah, you might see some energy savings, but, you know, I don't know, on a building that size, if it's 2,000 or 4,000 a year, you know, that's not gonna pay it off either. You know, my industry knowledge is that glass is at a premium right now. It's the highest it's ever been, except for January 1st, it's going up again. So, you know, glass is almost fully imported from China, and they have incredibly large shipping costs from there, so I don't know, that makes me want to lean to support it, so that's, I don't know. I guess I'd like anyone else's opinion on it.
So where does that leave us on approve? Do we want to get an answer on the rebate first?
How long's the bid good for? After January 1st, that bid could go up, you know, referring back to the information he has on glass.
It doesn't have that on this particular,
No, it doesn't have an end date on this.
Usually they have a 30-day from time
Yeah.
to bid.
it was, looks like it was given November 11th. Does that sound right, Kevin?
Yep.
A lifespan compared to the current and where we're at currently,
As far as with the windows,
yeah.
I mean, they're, I guess within the lifespan is what it was. They're still functioning is what it would be. There's no rust around it. I mean, the frames are good, that type of stuff. We were just looking at, I guess, the improvement and that, and hopefully cost savings up front.
The lifespan on the new ones.
Oh, that's,
Kind of a wag on my part, but it seems like the lifespan of just about everything from roofing to siding to HVAC is 25 years, isn't it?
don't see that in here.
Do you know how the ones are right now?
He said from the 70s?
Yeah, they would be from the 70s when they remodeled that front part of the building. It was Metz baking then.
In general, they say like a commercial grade window's about a 40-year lifespan. Typically, the aluminum sills and that kind of stuff, that's never going to go bad. That doesn't rust, it doesn't decay. What you will have is the seams and seals go bad, and those can just be replaced on a per window basis. It's usually like 80 to 120 per window. Depending on the size of the window, it can actually get up to 250, but
So I don't know if this is going to tip you, but it's, if we're at 40 to 50 years right now, and typical is 40.
yeah, but they
You know-
could have been maintained well at some point in there too.
Sure,
so.
sure. But I think, you know, in the next 10 years, I mean, just an idea, if glass is going to go up, and if there's, Mid-American's rebates are not changing after January 1st, so they're the same as they are this year, with a couple small exceptions. 6 months now, once you start the project, you actually have a year instead of 6 months to do the project once you get approval and start it. So I tend to think, since we're already toward the end of their useful life, and they have a $20,000 fund balance right now, and maybe there's 5 or 10 more, I would be supportive
I will move to approve.
with 55 from us and CIP and 20 from
Yes.
their fund balance?
Yes.
I would second.
That way you're locking in the price too, in case there is a rate, price gap, or last goes up January 1st, you're locked in.
I would second,
Yeah.
please, on the
The other
rebate
side
stuff.
of that is if we go about a year or two and something happens economically and all these prices plummet, or labor costs plummet or something else changes, you could be looking at 40 grand again. So we never know.
Yeah. Or you could be looking at higher,
Yeah,
right?
you know,
Yeah, it
so
is.
it's a gamble.
Yeah.
Welcome to the new world.
Yeah.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor for the 55-25 split. Any further discussion?
55-20.
55-20, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
I'm still going to vote no,
Passes 4-1, Radig opposed.
but I do appreciate what you do.
Oh, you bet, thank you.
Do you want this copy then, Kevin?
Yeah.
Item 13, reports on committee meetings. Item 14, second round of citizen concerns. Anybody wish to speak on anything that is not already on the agenda? Item 15, board concerns. No, we are not going to have a meeting next week. Thanks for bringing that up. And our next meeting would be January 3, the first Monday after the first of the year. And then we will have budget discussion at that time and not have a meeting on Tuesday, the 4th.
Two questions, Mr. Chair. For purpose of claims, is there anything that we need to be doing?
This, I've already spoken with Mr. Gill on this, and we will get it done. We've
And
been
then-
assured. I got the thumbs up.
And then do you know what time you would anticipate the January 3rd meeting? is?
What did we decide? 3:30 on the January 3 meeting to start, because we will start on some budget items. Sir?
We will have budget books out next week. The only thing we're waiting for is tax base, and that's been a problem because the utilities are a little messed up. They had to consolidate a school district, which is gonna get done. So they'll probably be out next week, and we'll try to get them out to you, but otherwise, we will have the budgets that's gonna be heard will be in your packet for the January 3rd. I will send a schedule out also to you first. I can send that out to you now. What we're gonna be handling.
Mr. Nara, do you have something? Briefly.
I will make it brief. I just want to bring this up during board concerns. I'm not here to discuss it on this one. The work we did fixing up 28th Street last week, it was about $4,000 in material, labor, and equipment time out there, so.
And thank you sincerely for jumping on that, excuse me, and keeping that project moving forward. So
Our crews are flexible and they can get out and do what needs to be done, so.
we have an outstanding crew under your leadership. Thank you very much. And for the storm damage too, I don't, probably not too many know this. Mark was out of town and I didn't exactly take over, but I kind of took over. I'm your liaison anyway, but I took over command of his foreman so that if we had anything that the sheriff's office needed, that the sheriff's office could contact them directly. Seemed to work out fine, and thankfully, like Mr. Nera said to me yesterday, that the entire storm turned out to be a little bit of a nothing burger.
This was not as bad as what it looked like it was going to be when everything started with the response that night, so. We're already more than 90% cleaned up on the roads where we had trees and limbs down, so it went pretty quickly.
Thank you
We
again.
were happy to be able to help out with the other, for the jail. It's a project that needs to keep moving, so.
Do we bill somebody for that?
That's in discussions.
Yeah. It was just about 4,000, inclusive of everything, so.
Any other board concerns?
Just want to thank the county attorney's office for the help on Navigator Summit, the pipelines, and I thought that was very well done, so appreciate it.
As board chairman, I would like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas in the room and watching from afar. And for almost total solidarity on the Christmas display of apparel and such. I see Mr. Taylor's decided to just go with his fancy new suit rather
It
than.
fell off, sorry.
In,
Can I take this thing off now, Dad?
yes, son. Past that, we are adjourned.